Muhammad Yunus with us this afternoon to guide us, to bless us, and to show us the way how to rebuild the economy, not only of our own nation, but nations around the world. Now that the whole world is looking towards new ideas and new ways of re-establishing our pathways for development and growth. Ladies and gentlemen, may I extend to you very warm welcome and warm greetings from Amity University, Haryana. Namaskar and very good afternoon. As the coronavirus lockdown continues in India and the world at large is reeling under the crisis of corona pandemic, our eyes here in India and I'm sure around on creating a brighter tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, coronavirus outbreak has forced us to rethink our strategies to create a secured future for the mankind. We in India, as you all know, stand for world peace and a compassionate humanity. Our spiritual civilization inspires us to work for the well-being and welfare of the vast humanity, and with a clear mandate to serve those who are at the bottom of the pyramid so that no one is left behind. Today, at this momentous occasion, we have with us one of the most illustrious sons of Mother Earth, namely Nobel Peace Laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus, to address us on his vision of rebuilding a better world, social business during the COVID times and beyond. Nobel Peace Laureate Professor Yunus Sahab, a very warm welcome to you on behalf of the entire Amity University fraternity and on my personal behalf and on behalf of my Honorable Chancellor and Honorable Founder President, sir, for the time you are sparing for us this afternoon. However, before I invite the Nobel Peace Laureate Professor Yunus Sahab to deliver his eminent address, may I take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to our Honorable Founder President, Dr. Ashok Chauhan, and our Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Singh Chauhanji. Without being between you and Professor Yunus, may I first invite my Honorable Chancellor to say a few words in the honor of the Nobel Laureate Professor Yunus. Sir, over to you, Honorable Chancellor Dr. Singh Chauhan.
Thank you, Professor P.V. Sharma. Very nice of you to introduce. It is such an honor and privilege to have online today Professor Muhammad Yunus, a true humanitarian who has spent every day of his life thinking about how to make the world better, how to help the underprivileged, how to help the downtrodden. I had the great pleasure of meeting Professor Yunus for the first time at our university in Rajasthan when he was kind enough to come and accept an honorary doctorate from us. And I must say, to meet Professor Yunus is like having an instant love affair. When you meet him and you hear his words and you hear his vision, one cannot help but fall in love with the thoughts that he has and the ideology that he has. And I told Professor Yunus in the first meeting itself that we are together now for life and we will help in your vision to implement your thoughts. And today at Amity, we have two very active Yunus social business centers, which are operating within the aegis of the thoughts and vision of Professor Yunus, one in Rajasthan and one in Haryana. And as I said, we want to have these all over the world at Amity campuses to take forward the words of our great Nobel laureate, Professor Yunus. Professor Yunus, I just want to brief 1 or 2 minutes about the activities of these centers so that you also know what great work through you and the team that is happening. So in Rajasthan, sir, we have adopted 5 villages. And under the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan project, we are doing livelihood projects in these rural areas nearby the university, working on helping develop social businesses in these 5 villages. We have also, in collaboration with NABARD, conducted capacity building programs for poor women of self-help groups in the Nagaur district of Rajasthan. We have organized skill development programs for the Bunker community of Rajasthan. Skill development, of course, is very important when we talk about developing social businesses. We have also conducted training programs, Professor Yunus, in financial literacy for a lot of women, especially contractual workers within the university and nearby the university, so that women can stand on their own feet. And financial literacy, as you have said, is so important for these women. We are currently working on a project on livelihood of women in self-help groups in Rajasthan together with the University Grants Commission. We are speaking to them under the STRIVE program. And in Haryana, we have developed a rural innovation village in which we are working on beta testing technologies in rural settings and developing social businesses. We have developed a social business lab at the university in Haryana, and we have, through our Amity Innovation Incubators across the country, we have a center called Rural Innovation and Social Entrepreneurship Center, in which we are trying to develop businesses for social business under your idea. But we are so inspired and motivated always by your thoughts and your words, sir. And I must say that your team, especially the team of the Yunus Center, which is now operating in so many countries, particularly your executive director, Lamia Morshed, they're doing such a wonderful job to take your thought and your vision forward. And we're working very closely to them. I had requested them that the great day of June 28th, which is Social Business Day, which also happens to be your birthday, but we celebrate it as Social Business Day, that we would like to join hands with the Yunus Center and our friend Hans in Munich to organize a big online global convention to take your thoughts forward and to celebrate you also on that day. And Lamia has kindly conveyed your thoughts that we are going to be part of this program, and we look forward to it. But Professor Yunus, we are so thankful today that you are addressing the Amity community. You are talking today to many, many hundreds of not only students, but also social entrepreneurs. We have sent this out to our networks from the Incubation Center, people who are developing small businesses and social businesses, those who are dedicated to social development of the country, and they see you as an idol, they see you as a messiah for those who want to help the poor through social businesses. And we're so happy to have our founder president, Dr. Ashok Chauhan, online, whose thoughts from the beginning have been that how can we help poor people through NGOs and social entrepreneurs. Amity itself is a big case study, sir, of this area. And when he heard that you were going to be on, despite his very busy schedule, he dropped everything and he said, I will want to myself come and see our great Professor Mohammed Yunus. So before we request you, sir, I will request the founder president just to say a few words and to bless us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Professor Mohammed Yunus Sahib, आज हमारे के पूरे ग्रुप के लिए this is a wonderful day. का हमारे सामने है तो हम सुनेंगे. मैं 2006 से I am following you regularly, trying to learn from your deeds, from your activities, and we feel so proud. We are so proud that such human beings on the earth, those who have capacity and capability to change the world. Microcredit was the first word was heard from you, and this Nobel Prize which you got has made the whole Indian subcontinent pride. People see Indian subcontinent people with more honor and respect. Credit goes to you, sir. Now I will hear you with eagerness, excitement, and we are so proud that you are here. The whole world is listening in. The webinar information has gone all over the world, and a large number of people are thinking this, and with all listeners.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful to hear you and be with you. Let me start by giving my greetings to Ashok Chauhan, the founder, who is right in front of me and my screen. And it's such a privilege to see you. What a wonderful achievement that you have made. And particularly, I admire your attention to the education. And this is where the changes will happen. The young people are the real change makers of the world. And you are preparing these young minds, young people, to make that happen. In one individual's like yours, you can't do everything, but you can prepare others to do the rest. And that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. And hundreds of thousands of these young people having the privilege of being exposed to what the world is all about and what the world can be. And this is what you have done. And Asim is doing wonderful work. We're very happy to meet him. I didn't get to meet you, but I met Asim. And it was a wonderful experience to meet him and what a wonderful person he is. When I visited Rajasthan campus, and I was greeted by all these horse riding young girls. I can't forget that. It's such an impressive to see these girls riding big horses and kind of escorting you to the hall, to the building. And that's a memory that I will cherish. And also the conversation I had with the young people. And I prefer to talk to the students about the future, about their capacity. And today I'll be talking about that also. This is one occasion I will try to explain to all the young people that this is something that happens once in a lifetime. It's an opportunity. It never repeats itself. It's a deepest of the crisis, but it's also the highest opportunity, brightest opportunity to make things happen. If we can do something, this magnifies itself and touching so many lives, which you cannot do in some other normal or usual times. So this is a time, this is an occasion when you can transform the whole world. It's in your hand right now. So I want to draw attention to that, to all the young people who may be on this call, that you consider this is something other generations never had, because they never had a crisis like this, catastrophe like this. So that catastrophe provides you the opportunity to make things happen in a very magnified way. You touch a little thing, it becomes very big. So it's a very important time of your life. Don't let it go away. Don't let it slip away from your fingers, from your mind. So bring all the creative ideas, all the creative thinking that you may have, so that you can use this in a small way. You'll be surprised how big it became because you touched it on the right time and the right place. So this is the right time. This is the right place. That's what I wanted to emphasize at the beginning of my talk. And I'm very happy that I could get this opportunity to Asim and Professor Sharma to meet you today. And today is another important day for another reason. I don't know how much publicity you have in your televisions. A big cyclone is coming to Bangladesh. They even call it a super cyclone, right on the way now. In 12 hours from now, it will hit Bangladesh coast. I don't know how damaging it will be, because they keep building it up and saying it's a super cyclone. We are used to cyclones, but little cyclones, moderate cyclones. But this is built as a super cyclones. And we are all praying all over Bangladesh. I'm sure part of West Bengal will be hit too. And we don't know what is coming up in the next 24 hours, in the next 12 hours. I hope the cyclone will turn its path and go away some other direction without hitting human population and so on. But this is at the top of the corona crisis. Corona has pushed everybody back into their rooms, locked up in your rooms. You cannot interact with anybody. And this is going on for a couple of months now. And the whole country is locked out. This is an experience, again, never happens in a lifetime of any generation. But our generation, we had it right now. We got it right now in front of us. And there are several things which are coming up because of the coronavirus lockdown and the catastrophe that is brought in terms of life and death. Several things. One I should mention is the fact that it revealed some basic nature of human beings. We were saying that we came a long way in history to come together so that we can work together. All nations on the globe, all nations on the planet can stay together fighting common enemy. This is a common enemy. Coronavirus is a common enemy. We would have we expected that we will be fighting it in a kind of a coordinated way, but we didn't. The moment it hit us, each nation reacted individually, reacted in its own way, right way, wrong way, but independently. And they even ignored their neighbors. didn't care what happened to their neighbors by the action they're taking. And sometimes, despite the fact it will harm the neighbors, they went ahead and did it and created tension between the governments, between the countries, one after another. We saw bitterness between United States and China. Americans blaming China for everything, for the coronavirus and all kinds of things. So this is not the right time to kind of behave in a tribal way rather than in a global way. But we did. The United States even went ahead and attacked the very organization which is supposed to lead the whole world fight this corona crisis. And instead of giving them the recognition as a leader and stay behind them, despite our dissents after our disagreements on issues, but at the crisis time, when the fight is at the peak, you don't challenge your leader, you don't challenge everything they are doing. That they did. So this is again revealed our tribal mentality that we couldn't overcome. So we have to now work hard so that we can build a coordinated efforts to fight a global problem like this. Corona will not disappear by one day, but it will continue, and we have to have a feeling, develop our skill, and develop our mindset to coordinate and join hands with each other so that we can fight our common enemy. While we are fighting common enemy and thinking about this, I would also mention that one way we can fight ultimately is to develop the vaccine. And so everybody is busy developing vaccines. That's good. And many governments have poured in billions of dollars in research and in the development process and so on. But ultimately, when the vaccine will be produced, it will be designed and produced. The thing that will happen, few companies, maybe half a dozen companies in the world, the mega pharmaceutical companies, they will control these vaccines and they will decide at what price to whom they will sell. And that is revealed when Sanofi, the French mega pharmaceutical company, Sanofi CEO announced that the first productions of the vaccine, when they will start, we are developing it, when they will start producing it, it will go to United States. And that created lots of unhappiness around the world, and it created a lot of unhappiness to France. After all, Sanofi is a French company, and President of France was extremely unhappy because France itself has poured in lots of money in developing this vaccine with Sanofi. So when the Sanofi will be producing it, they're already announced that it will go to the United States. That's the danger part of it. If you give control over lives, this vaccine is a control over lives. You have the key how to save people's life, and you give it to someone and don't give it to somebody else. You prioritize one against another. That should not be the spirit of vaccine development. So we have been talking about it for a long time now. We'll be repeating it now. I hope you'll join us and you'll raise this voice everywhere. That the vaccine, whenever it is produced, it should be labeled, it should be declared as a global common good. It's a common good. Nobody has a power to control it. Nobody has the ownership to it. Like air, like water, nobody has control over air that we breathe. It's a common good. So that's the kind of vaccine should be. It will be common good. Anybody can produce it following the recipe of the medicine. And WHO, the World Health Organization, can follow it up to make sure that you are doing it in the right way. And then it will be available to wherever you want and whoever wants to produce it. So that it can be produced everywhere so that people have access to that vaccine. We need 8 billion vaccines for every single person in this world. So if you go through the mega companies controlling it, they will be making windfall profits in exchange of people's life. So that's not something that we would like to happen. And we want to make sure it is a common public good. And I'm very happy yesterday, Chinese President Xi, he has announced that whenever China produces this vaccine, it will be a common public good. it will be global public good. It will not be controlled by China. It will not be controlled by anybody. Any ownership will not be there. It will be everybody's property. Everybody can use it the way they want. So this is a good start. China has given a good leadership to that. And I hope other countries will do that. But we have to keep on raising this issue that vaccines, whenever they are produced, whoever produces it, it should be a public good. We should not allow that. If we make this vaccine controlled by some ownership someplace, it will be slow in going to people's hands because they want to make sure the highest bidder gets the money, gets the vaccine. So people who don't have the ability to make the highest bid will always fall back, and many, many countries will never get to it. In the absence of those vaccines in those countries, fake vaccines will be produced by every place. So another business will start selling and producing and selling fake vaccines, and it will flood the market. You will not be able to distinguish between the right one and the wrong one, because it's created this opportunity by controlling the genuine vaccines by few people. So we do not want to have this fake vaccines in our life, and we want to make the genuine vaccine. We want to make sure vaccines are produced and by the social businesses. This is one occasion social business becomes extremely important. We can create social business pharmaceutical company where we'll take the recipe and produce the vaccines so that we can sell at the cost price. We are not here to make money as a social business, and we can continue, expand it, and locally produce it to make sure everybody gets it, and we can have a cross-subsidization so that rich people who can afford to pay, they will pay. People who cannot afford to pay will not pay. And the people that will be paying will be actually paying for the people who cannot pay. So in total, social business will cover the cost. And that's the spirit in which that all drugs, not only vaccine, all drugs should be produced. So I will be appealing in this context that whoever can to create drug companies, pharmaceutical companies as social business. It's the most important thing because it's about life. Life depends on those vaccines, depends on those medicines. But today, big pharmaceutical companies control the price, control the supply to make money for themselves. So one way to save people is that trillions of dollars are spent on medicine and on healthcare. Half of those money spent on healthcare goes into medicine, cost of medicine. Medicine shouldn't be costing so much. Real cost of medicine is much less, but the money making makes it very extremely expensive. So we want social business to be created, and you young people can start designing those social business pharmaceutical companies in a small way, in a medium way, in a large way, in a global way. It's all possible, and vaccine will lead the way. This is one idea that we should be producing vaccines as a social business enterprise. So this is another one. Third one related to Corona is the issue that has been raised very frequently is about life versus livelihood. And I feel very uncomfortable when you raise this issue of the life versus livelihood issue, because these are not tradable things. Life is not something you can trade with. Life is something what is unique, and by all means we'll be protecting life at the cost of everything else. This is the primacy of life is very important to recognize. This is something that we cannot kind of exchange with something else. So we should not forget livelihood is something, yes, it's important, but it should not be compared with life. So this is not comparison at all. And good thing is livelihood has many options. Life doesn't have an option. Life is something whether you have it or you don't have it because you're dead. So we don't have to have that option of death. We want to celebrate life, want to maintain that life cannot be compared with anything else at any cost. So we concentrate on the livelihood issue. Livelihood has many options. It's all about food. That's a livelihood about income and the food. Because they are losing income, the food is needed, all the migratory population from India moving from one city to going back to their home because they were jobless, incomeless, and going home. So this is happening everywhere, wherever the situation of economy is like that. People have to move around. But the question is, just because they lost the job, should automatically shut down their door for food? No, it shouldn't be. There are options. There are many options how to provide food. That's where the ration cards came. That's where the subsidized food came. That's why free distribution of food came. There are many such options on the food front, and citizens can take responsibility of their neighbors, creating food support system within their own neighborhood and so on. It's not something that government has to do everything. So there's a whole slew of things that can be done. And then there is a whole world of thought about the universal basic income. If that point has any relevance at all, that concept has any relevance at all, this is the time to think about that. For the corona period, for the disaster period, yes, government should introduce universal basic income. Basically, that's what the government of India is trying to do in many ways. And India is very lucky because it has introduced Aadhaar, this unique number, unique personal number. This is very, very important thing India has done. Today, you can take these numbers and everybody can pick up numbers. You take 10 numbers, I take 5 numbers who cannot support themselves in food. So I said, I take these 5 numbers that I have, my capacity. I'll take these numbers to my banker, and he will send money every week to these other numbers, so that these families or the other numbers will be protected. And I take care of 5. And somebody takes care of 10. Somebody takes care of 1,000. Some company takes care of 100,000. It's possible. It's not something very fishy, it's very strange. It's all question of we share. Now we are sitting around, we are watching what Modi ji is doing. We are not saying what we are doing. We have the capacity to feed every single person in India with Aadhaar. And there's enough capacity within individual families, within individual companies to make that happen. All sharing the numbers. Give me the numbers, allocate the numbers, I'll take care of it. And this is nothing. This is our home, this is our family. We take care of the crisis time the family members. This is a simple idea. And India has this infrastructure, which many countries don't have. So please pay attention to that and share it. Don't throw everything on Prime Minister's lap that he has to do it, or government's lap. We citizens are as powerful. Sometimes we are more powerful than the government because we are so many of us and we can do and undo many things. If we divide up all the migrant workers among ourselves, each one will have very small number of people to support. It's in total. When you come to dividing up to among a large number of people, large number of families, it becomes very small number to take. So these are the kind of thoughts that you can kind of share with us. The one particular issue that I want to share today, I feel very strong about it, and when the coronavirus will be over, someday it will be over, and we'll be in a rush to go back, start all the things all over again. And my point is, I am appealing to everybody every day, saying, please don't go back. We must decide we don't want to go back from where we are coming from. Because I would try to remind people where we are coming from was not a good place. It was not a good world that we are coming from. The world that we are coming from before January 2022 was a very hot world. It's about to blow away, destroy ourselves. We are at the disaster point. We are at the jumping point of disaster that we are finishing ourselves. We are at the finishing line. And luckily, Corona happened. We didn't have to go up to the finishing line. Before the finishing line of disaster, we reached, Corona took us away and stopped it. And the whole world stopped. And luckily, we stopped it. Now, if we start and go back to that point, we'll be destroying ourselves. So starting this whole world to go back to the same old point that we are coming from will be absolutely suicidal. We will be committing suicide if you go back. So I'm appealing to everybody, please make sure you get this point, and please make sure we don't go back. No going back. That's one decision every government has to take, every citizen has to take, every company has to take. We don't want to go back. What was wrong with the world that we are coming from? It was wrong because of the global warming. Global warming made it unlivable. It's impossible to live. And we say hardly a decade or two left before the whole world was becoming unlivable place. And this is getting too hot for the whole world. And things we saw sign. And you remember, just to give some examples of what was happening, you remember the Amazonia forest fire? It was burning away miles and miles and miles of forest in Amazonia. And why? Not because Amazonia has tendency to catch fire. No, it's a human being who introduced this fire to make this forest disappear so that they can clear up the forest. Why? They want to cultivate soybean. They want to cultivate cattle feed. So this is commercial use. This is a commercial interest. So the commercial interest destroying the whole world. And what happened after coronavirus came? Did the procedure stop? Well, we are back in the home. We are behind the doors in our rooms. I'm told, I was talking to my friends in Brazil, still it's going on. Still the same companies burning the forest. Merrily going on, miles and miles of forest. And nobody's paying attention to it because everybody's busy with coronavirus. So they are having a heyday doing that. So this is the world that we created already, and it will destroy us, kill us. This will kill us. And you remember Australian fire, nearly 1 billion species of life have been killed, because more than 1 billion species of life has been killed in Australian forest fire. And this is here. This is not disappearing. So on top of it, there's an extreme wealth concentration going on. And wealth is jumping up to go in one direction, in the hands of few people in everyday financial system working for that. So we have a very strange world created, and I say it's a ticking time bomb. It will kill us. It will destroy us unless we stop it. It's not the fault of the people who are making the money. It's the fault of the system that we created. The system is pushing the money in the hands of the people who already have money. And that is a wrong system. So we have to rebuild the system in a way wealth doesn't go in one direction. Wealth gets distributed everybody else, so that it be shared, it will be enjoyed. It should be given us capacity to do much better thing for the world. The third point that we had before the coronavirus began was the threat of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, you remember, coming in a big way. Still it's waiting. Probably as soon as we open it, they will come in a big way. They will say we don't need any people to work for us because the machines will work for us. Artificial intelligence is so powerful that they will push all the human beings away from the work. And they already have a very clear blueprint how many people each year will be replaced by artificial intelligence. So what happens if people are pushed away from our workplace and machines are working and somebody's making money out of it? They're very happy because machine is much more cheaper to produce things and makes a bottom line bigger, and they make lots of money out of that. I said, that's not the kind of economy we want to build, to push away human being from work and the creativity and then destroy their future and so on. So that's the world that we don't want to get back to, the massive unemployment. So we have the wealth concentration with the global warming, we have the massive unemployment, and we are about to collapse. And that's the point. So now corona pandemic has given a great opportunity to not to be there. So please make sure that we don't be there. We create a new world, a world which we will create will be world of zero wealth concentration, which will be a zero net carbon emission, which will be world of zero unemployment. It's all possible. Now everything is open. It's in our hand now. So all we have to do is to be creative. So young people who are listening to this talk, I will say that you don't know how to detail out everything. You don't have to. All you need is imagination. Why don't you imagine that world? Imagine how to do that. Make fictions. You don't have to draw the precise lines that your teachers have been teaching you. That is for the academic purpose. Today, as a human being, you imagine. Imagine that this is the world I want to make. How do I do it? I'll do it this way. I'll jump it here. You don't have to detail out everything. You make fictions. And you know, the fiction is the mother of the reality. You create fiction today. Tomorrow you'll say, why not? Why not make it real? And you'll make it real. So this is a good time for reflection This is a good time to kind of imagine a new world for us, so that by the time we end this corona pandemic, we are ready to go create a new world. And it's possible. That's what, if this is the deepest of the crisis, this will be the most wonderful thing happen to the world, to save ourselves, save the world around us. And this is an opportunity for the young people and all of us, all the young people who are packed with unlimited creative capacity. So use your creative capacity now to the fullest. Don't wait for anybody else. Today, you have lots of time because you are not going to the routine work that you used to do. You have time, you consult, you have each other's telephones, each other's chat box, and talk to each other. Design something, compete with each other. How wild your imagination can be. Wilder is the imagination, the better option that you are giving to the world. That's the one, the wildest imagination will make this world possible. So that's an appeal that I want to make. And I'll stop here and let you have a discussion and see how we can make it happen. But don't give up. This is a question of not giving up. It's a question of making sure that we don't go back. We make a new world. This is our chance. We don't want to miss that. Professor Sharma?
Yeah, Professor Sharma, please unmute you. Yes.
It's a great privilege, sir, to hear you and for the great advice and counsel, not only to the young, but also to everybody who is listening to you. COVID-19, the coronavirus, has given us a great opportunity to rebuild a better world than the world which we have left behind just before coronavirus. This world, Professor Yunus, the Honorable Nobel Laureate, want to create a world where there would be zero unemployment and there would be zero penalty to the environment, so that we are in a position to create prosperity as well as tears on the faces and smiles on the faces of billions of our people around the world. With this great advice and great counsel coming from the Honorable Nobel Laureate, I want to pick up a few questions which are there coming to me from audiences. I can see my Honorable Chancellor, sir, as well as Madam Chancellor on the screen. What a pleasure it is to have both of you. Sir, if you wish to raise any question to begin with, then I'll go to the questions of the audience. Honorable Chancellor, sir, if you have any.
Thank you.
Sir, let me get a few questions which have come to me from the audience, and audience is eager enough to thresh out these questions. One of the great questions, of course, is that during the last 72 years of independence here in India, as well as during the last 1 century, we have developed a mindset that urbanization is the answer for development. And we pulled great crowds of our capable people from the villages to our urban cities and created great slums around. Now that we have gone back to our basics, sir, how to change this mindset? This is the biggest question which we have in the minds of not only people like us in academia, but all those who are in the world of policy planning, as well as in the world of industry and businesses. Your revert on this, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. First, I will say that it's not about the location of a person, whether he's in the village or he's in the city. City doesn't make things. It's the person who makes things. It's the creativity of the person is the most important thing. So the location is totally immaterial. And whether a creative person is in the village or is in the city, doesn't matter. He remains creative. But we create the framework wrong. The framework that we created, we are not emphasizing on the creativity of the person. We are saying that you have to find a job for your survival. And you look around in your village, there is no job. The jobs which you had no longer exist. So what do? You go to the place where the job is. And everybody says you go to the nearest town, they may have a job. And you go there. You don't find it, go to the big city in your state. And you find it, lucky. If not, you go to the other national big city where the job. So people are going to the city not for the attraction of the city itself. It's a destruction of his own livelihood. And not only the job, you don't have education. If you want to have a good education, you have to leave your village because you don't have education. You went to primary school there, but you don't have a high school there. So you go to the next big city to go to the high school. And then when you go to college, place has no college, you go to the next one. So, and the best education is at the best city. So you run there because you want to get the. So we have concentrated all the best things in the cities, and people are pushed into doing things to go there. The moment you say you individual is a person who changed the world, you can bring your education, you can healthcare, you can everything. Today with technology, it's possible. The moment you make it possible, then you bring the whole idea that you don't have to look for a job because you are not a job seeker, you are an entrepreneur. So we create a financial system differently because when we are moving from the coronavirus world to the new world of opportunities and new world of new life, we'll be telling ourselves that we can create our own financial system. This financial system is not good for the new world. This financial system is a vehicle for wealth concentration because it supports only the rich people. The richer you are, more privileges you get from the financial system. They are after you, not for the poor guy, not for the middle guy, and so on. They are reluctantly giving it to some crumbs to middle guy and something so that they can reach out to the big guy and do business comfortably. We have to redesign the entire financial system. Bulk of the financial system will make it a social business financial system. We are not there to make money. We are there to solve people's financial problems. If you want to start your business, I come with financial support for you as a social business. I'm not looking for my profit. I'm looking for your future. And I design it, and you take it, and you continue to grow, and I keep on supporting you with no paper, with no collateral or anything else. This is a system we developed, and it works, and that's the kind of system. If we had that financial system, for example, just one example of financial system, why should anybody leave the village? If I can get the money, if I can get I can start a business. Village is as good a place to start a business as anywhere else. With the technology given, it's possible. So this artificially created cities are creating all the problems for human beings. The slums and the migrant workers, everywhere people have to go and work for the people who live in the cities because they don't have the job in their own villages. So everything went in a wrong direction. Because our thinking was wrong, our framework is wrong, our concepts were wrong. So this is the time to fix the concepts, fix the framework, and make people go the way they naturally are, as a human being, as a creative being, and do things wherever they live. It's no problem. So it is available, and it's reaching out to you and convenient for you. So there is no distinction rather between the city, and people may prefer village because it's a cleaner life. It's an easy breathing space, so that you have close to the nature rather than artificial buildings and concretes that you are surrounded with. So that's a chance that we have to take right now. I can't hear you. The suddenly voice goes.
You're absolutely right, Honorable Noble Laureate, sir, that we must go back to basics, go back to our villages and create millions and millions of enterprises and jobs over there. But the opportunity has come all of a sudden. How do you see really social entrepreneurship to be built up in places where people were earlier rushing toward the city for all kind of needs and settlements, and suddenly they have gone back now? They are in a shock. And we see millions of people walking back to their villages in India, and I'm sure same thing may be happening in Bangladesh and many other countries around the world. So how do I now go and approach them and give them a better meaning and value of social entrepreneurship of the kind which you have pursued lifelong, and to support them through the financial arrangements, microfinance, and structures like that? This is a big challenge. So what is the advice you have to offer now to grab this opportunity which has come so sudden, without any preparation of policies, programs, and mindset? Sir, your advice.
Yes, it's a formidable task because everything crumbled. all the big pillars of the all the structure of economy, all the walls of the buildings of the old economy has crumbled. So it's a plain land now. So you start with the scratch. You can build your own pillars now. This is an opportunity that you have your own pillars. You don't have to build up the old pillars. You have to have new pillars now, own pillars. So this is the opportunity. It's a slow process, but if you keep up, if you plan it right, then it's a human being which will do that. Each one of us taking responsibility of one little piece, one small number of people, suddenly it turns into billions of people. So that's an advantage. When people get into action, if you depend on the government, it will never be done. Government can give you the framework as you need it. Like they give you the framework and the legal system or legal framework to create social business banking system, to create social business investment funds. So we create social business investment fund in our district. We create social business investment fund in our village. We create social business venture capital fund in our panchayat, and so on. So if we do that, there'll be enormous numbers. Some will be moving slow. Some will be moving at a moderate speed. Some will be moving very fast. And we learn from each other along the way. So you have to create a whole process of rejuvenation of energy. So that yes, you have the energy, we make it happen. And we have gone through this process before. When you mentioned about the independence of India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and all these places when British have left. What happened on the day one? Everybody said, you cannot run the country, you don't know how to run the country. We did. We took it over. We ran the country and continued. And in the beginning, there might be some mismatch. There were not tables and chairs for the office and so on. Whenever you start something new, you don't get everything preset. You have to build it up. That's the opportunity. When you build it up, you do it in your own way. That becomes the legacy. That becomes the system which will be followed by others. So I don't give up just because it's something new. I'd rather get excited it's new, and this is our chance to make it happen.
I can see the opportunity, and I see your counsel, sir, that without losing even a split second, let us move into the villages and grab this opportunity and create social entrepreneurship. I have called it mass entrepreneurship phenomena throughout the country, so that millions and millions of people, especially the youngsters, empowered with technology, empowered with tremendous amount of innovation and technology power, would really go into the villages and support the local people to generate really millions and millions of job and enterprise. This is a great opportunity. The only danger, which one of the questions being asked by one of the attendee, a learned person, is asking, how do you counsel and convince those big players who know that the business is for making money and not for the charity of the kind which Nobel laureate Professor Yunus would like it to be in a way he described. How do I go about and tackle the mindset of those big players in business who are currently ruling the world? And I see this happening throughout the world, not only here in India. Kindly, how do I go about impacting their behavior and their mindset?
Absolutely. Yes, I understand that point, that you're looking at the big players, the big businesses, and so on, all accustomed and used to making big money. But I also see the difference in those categories of people who are coming out of those shells and making a big effort in changing the way businesses used to be. So when we talk about social business, this is something they've enjoyed. They want to be participant in it. So I don't see every businessman is one way and I'm talking about something else. What I'm talking is not as someone outside of business. I'm talking about anybody, anywhere, whether you are in business, whether you're out of business, doesn't matter. Because your children, you may be a billionaire in wealth you have accumulated, but it is your teenage young child, 8th grade, 9th grade young person, a girl or a boy, who was demonstrating on the street, celebrating Fridays for Future. This is the same person, same family. He's debating with his father, his mother, that why you do this, why don't you do this? So they are not immune from all these ideas. It's a cross current of everything and this happening. So they are going through the same coronavirus that we are talking about. And they are thinking about what is next. So if we can bring these ideas to them, they may start thinking that maybe I should do it. And we are not dismissing them. We said you can create a social business along your conventional business. We are not dismissing your conventional business. You do the new business alongside. You do your CSR all the time. You give money away from your company. I said, instead of giving CSR, why don't you use the CSR money to create social business investment fund so that people take it and bring it back to you. So that fund can become bigger and bigger rather than it bigger. So they say it's meaningful. I'm not giving up everything. I'm just trying it out. And once you try it out, my idea is once you try it out, that you get hooked into it. You get tremendous amount of pleasure in doing things which was never done before. So these are the things that I try to focus on. Invite them, participate, and try it out. And it doesn't harm anybody to save people. It's wonderful.
I know it's a Herculean task, and it's indeed a monumental agenda for all those in position of power and authority. But a question is relating to your own specialty, sir. Mr. Uday Van Singh is asking me, do you think current microfinance model is able to revive micro enterprises in India? If not, what changes are required in the current microfinancing model which we already have in our country? I know there are organizations like NABARD and others who are in the game to support our people in the grassroots, in the rural areas. But do you think radical reforms are required in the microfinancing sector at this moment of time now?
Yeah, I talk about radical redesign of the entire financial system. And this also includes the microfinance also. Some microfinances go in the wrong direction because they started microfinance not to help people as such. Their intention is by microfinance, they can make lots of money. So that's the wrong intention of microfinance. We created microfinance as a social business. We had no intention of making personal money out of it. So that was the pure form of microfinance. So I've been writing in India or any other country to create social business microfinance organizations. Then suddenly the wide doors open for people. That there is no underlining intention that they want to get the money to make themselves rich rather than see us overcome problems. They feel free. And those are the kind of things I said, when we create a new structure of financial system, a bulk of the system will be designed as a social business financial system. Then you see all these issues that we have been raising can be addressed. It will be addressed to the system, not by some outside elements by changing things. If you give it, they will be the one who will be shooting the problems inside the business itself and then create the social business to solve those problems. Built into the system. Yeah.
I got the point, sir. The message is loud and clear to the Niti Aayog of our country. Spend hours and hours, even overnight, to draw new trajectories of growth in the rural areas, supported by new structures of microfinancing, which are very so urgently required over there. There is a touching question Mr. Prakash Bhatt has asked, and he says that large percentage of national budgets, not only here in India, but around the world and great nations, is spent on defense expenditure. Should the SAARC country take the lead in disarmament in this subcontinent so that the scarce resources could be diverted for the welfare of the people of the subcontinent? Do we require a major radical thinking on how we spend money on the defense as against the money for the welfare of the people?
I was the most excited young person at that time when the SAARC was formed. I thought that's the future of this region, that we'll have another opportunity to get closer to each other and share life with each other, rather than fight on the borders, fight on this, those kind of things, which is a meaningless thing, absolutely. So that SAARC gradually kind of gone into non-existence. So we have to revive the whole concept of SAARC as an idea of creating a common South Asian community, almost like similar to European Union, a South Asian Union, where you'll have our system, the Southeast Asian government, and each one have their own flags, but each country will have two flags, one the Union flag and the flag of just like the European Union and so on. There will be no passports or visas needed to travel each other. Today, it's impossible to go from one country to another country, and always some problems and so on. So those kind of things, if you come back to it, we can decide that. And once you have it, you don't have army to fight with each other. European Union doesn't have an army to fight with Germany versus France. It doesn't have any. So those are the kind of things that we have to do, because it is something that is extremely needed, and it's not only for South Asian Union. It's gradually we'll have a whole world coming together, building energy, nuclear energy, and also those. The deadly weapons, and using artificial intelligence to kill everybody else, and those kind of things. This is the kind of thing that we have to become aware that life is not about killing. Life is about celebrating life itself. And we should be sharing that life, not kind of competing away from others.
I'm sure, sir, you have a great point on this. But some people say that technology can also help you to celebrate life and get connected at the whole world as we are connected here in this webinar. So the message we have to send now, how to utilize advantage technology, especially for the cause of zero unemployment and zero penalty on the environment through new age of entrepreneurship, which should cover millions and millions of people into the arena of production and arena of work of business. Now, but one more point, one more question which has come from Mr. V. Zhang from, I believe, from Hong Kong. How the change of geopolitics, especially with China, U.S. tension, would affect the global philanthropy and social entrepreneurship collaboration and landscape in post-COVID. This is one of the concerns people have.
I hope we have a better election in the USA to begin with, so that we have a responsible political leader emerging in US leadership, because the present leadership is very uncertain, very unreliable. So we don't know what happens to the world. He attacks this, attacks that. He even threatens India, if you don't sell me those medicine, I'll take action against you. And those kind of things. It's a crazy situation like that. So it's a mutual thing. It's not something that everybody's crazy. It's one guy gets crazy and make everybody's headache. Definitely, we would like to see that the world has a responsible leadership, a leadership which wants to bring peace to the world so that people can enjoy life rather than kill each other, always looking for opportunity to attack each other and bomb each other, destroy each other. That's not the direction that we would like to go. And about the technology, I have a quick comment on that. I always mention that technology can be a blessing. Technology can be a curse. So I just point out the curse part. This is the curse. We should not move into that direction. I mentioned artificial intelligence. Part of artificial intelligence will be a curse, which replaces human beings on jobs. But artificial intelligence is a wonderful thing in healthcare.
Yes.
With artificial intelligence coming into healthcare can change the entire healthcare system. It's affordable and to the point and everything and precise. It's possible with artificial intelligence. But I'm not condemning artificial intelligence wholesale. I'm saying its use. The technology doesn't have its own mind. It's the mind of the people which is carried out by the technology. So if you have a bad mind, you use the technology for bad results. So if you have a good mind, you use the technology for good results. So artificial intelligence can be a wonderful blessing. Just not only healthcare, many other education and everything. It's a wonderful help to help people enjoy life. But if you use it in the wrong way, it can be destroying people by military use of artificial intelligence, by in the hands of the military leaders who want to destroy other people. So that's something that we don't want to do. As we have banned nuclear weapons, we should ban use of artificial intelligence in military purposes. If we can do that, one, we can do the other two. So I'm trying to eliminate those part of which is a curse, and make decisions that no scientist will work for this, and scientists will kind of sign an agreement that will not do anything. Absolutely. It's like the doctors have their own what they can do, what they can do.
Absolutely.
Technology for the benefit, not for the.
We are coming more or less to the close of today's seminar. You are absolutely right. We had to reinvent the human face of technology and what I have often called the spiritual power of science. So that the spiritual power of science and the human face of technology together could move the mountains of the kind which we have in front of us right at this moment, and create a new world, a better world, a world without unemployment, a world without penalty to environment, a world of bliss, a world where each one of us could manifest the immense creative and innovative potential which we have in billions of our people around the world. But one last question I thought I'm hesitant to ask, but let me ask myself. I see a great opportunity of Asia coming together like the European Union has been created. Could there be a time when China, India, Singapore, Bangladesh, Pakistan also, and also our great neighbors which we have, including Japan and the countries in the southeast, can we all come together and create one Asia of the kind which Akhand Bharat was in the days when we recall it as Jambu Deepa? Is there a possibility of that kind in your mind, sir?
It's always. I said boundaries doesn't make sense. The boundaries between people and so on, the nations. Someday we will have today it will be a fiction that we will have a tourist attraction that people will be visiting, saying this used to be a border between Bangladesh and India. People will laugh. What is a border? Why do they have the border of those? And they will show this is the border between Pakistan and India. Whoa, what is this? What is this border about? But you will understand why people have to build borders between people. So those are the days we have to build. It's not something today. It looks like a fiction, but if you have a fiction in our mind, reality will follow that. And this is the kind of world. So if you build the South Asian Union, for example, to begin with, the 8 countries that we have, with the 8 countries, we build the South Asian Union, just follow the footsteps and innovate a little bit to make it our own. But basically, it's the same thing, that they follow the examples of European Union. They used to fight with each other. They would fight for years and years, thousands of years they fought and bled each other's country. But today they are living together and maybe moving from one place to another as if past history doesn't make any sense to them. So that same thing can happen to this region also. So that becomes an example. And then ASEAN countries almost covers everybody else. In ASEAN, you've got everybody else. So ASEAN becomes follow the same example of South Asia. So we have ASEAN and South Asia. Yeah. Then we have a South Asian and ASEAN together in one block. So there is no reason why we should be having separate union. We can have a common.
Maybe one Asia and Asian Union in our own lifetime, where India, China, and all our countries can pull together, because bulk of the humanity is residing on this side, and luckily 21st century has been christened as the century for the East. And we have to discover a more profound meaning of the century of the East, which 21st century is. Maybe the COVID-19 has thrown that opportunity wide open to each one of us to come together, to work together, and to fight together our common enemies. Before I close, because my brief is more or less coming to an end, may I request my Honorable Chancellor to say a few words in the honor of the Nobel laureate, sir. Any other questions which may be there in the mind of my Chancellor you would like to address out? Honorable Chancellor Dr. Singh Chauhan ji, sir.
All questions have been addressed so well by Professor Yunus. I just want to say how grateful we are, Professor Yunus, that you have made the time for the whole Amity Network, and we have thousands and thousands of people all over the world listening. from more than dozens of countries. People have logged in to hear you today, and my greetings go out to all of our colleagues at the different Yunus Social Business Centers around the world, all the initiatives of the Yunus Center, our colleagues at the Yunus Center itself. I'm also very thankful to your great daughter, Dina, for having helped with the technology today. It was very kind of her, and she is such an integral part of your operations and helps you. So Dina, our greetings to you. Professor Yunus, one time you had said, Aseem, be my global ambassador to take this message to the world. And I can only commit to you that I am your ambassador in every way. We'll continue to take your ideology and your thoughts to the world, because I believe that if we follow your thoughts, we can make the world a better place. And that is also the commitment of Amity under the vision and guidance of our founder president. So thank you, sir, for your time today. And I will now request founder president, Dr. Ashok Chauhan, to just say a few closing words and convey his greetings to you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You are a great technocrat, innovator, scientist, and a great leader, the founder director of DCE and the founder, vice chancellor of Delhi Technical University. But today you have proven you are more than that. The way you moderated and anchored this wonderful show, my compliment, Professor Sharma. Professor Yunus, I must tell you, in the beginning, you prayed that the cyclone Ifan does not bring much destruction and does not bring harm to the lives. I join your prayers, but you have made a problem for me. You have brought cyclone in my mind, body, brain, and soul. Through your deliberations, through your each word of yours, each word, I must tell you a lesson for me. For example, you told that make a new word. You told fictions is the word of reality. So these are the words which are timely at the moment, and your message has gone to my students, to my faculty members, and I would say, just follow each word of Professor Sahib, our Dr. Yunus ji, and you will change the world. I will make a request to Aseem ji, my brilliant worthy son, that at your Amity University, Rajasthan, or at Haryana, make a shield which will be given at every convocation to a student who follows most your Yunus Social Service Center, because this center will really help in changing the world with the ideas and with the dedicated activities of Professor Yunus ji. And secondly, Professor P.V. Sharma, register a PhD fellow either in Rajasthan or in Haryana, and we will request Professor Yunus Sahib to be one guide of that PhD fellow or supervisor, because I want to create people under him, those who disseminate his ideas for decades and centuries to come. And I appreciate, Simji, that you instantly developed this center, and I think this should be done in all our universities in India and abroad. And I think at our university campus in New York, 170-acre campus, we should make a branch for this center to show to the whole world. Now, Indian subcontinent will lead and will show the way to the whole world how a better humanity, a better world can be made. So, simply to request, but Sir Professor Yunus Sahib, I am thrilled. I am amazed. I have no words. I'm listening a lot of webinars today, but I would say this webinar, your session, was the session of the decade. I mean it, because हमारे विचार, आपके विचार 100% मिलते हैं. Aseem ji, as elder brother, Atul Chauhan, they are all following your thoughts. Our Chancellor for Amity University Noida is also listening it. His wife Pooja is also listening it. And my wife, Dr. Amita Chauhan ji, who is running 5 schools all over the world, she's also listening it. When they heard, sir, you are coming on session, they left everything. Divya is sitting over here. So we are so grateful to you, for my all family members. It was a day which will change the world, sir.
Thank you. It's wonderful to hear you, wonderful to all your family members.
Would you tell me something about this field and the Sharma, about this PhD?
So, Professor Yunus, Dr. Chauhan has given some ideas. We'll follow these, we'll implement these. and we'll follow up with you. There are many other ideas we will keep discussing with you, but we are so grateful and thank you so much for your time.
Assisting me like your daughter, and the movement in this session is just sitting all the time here to so that everything is very clear. So I would say that all these persons from my family are now your pupils, your followers.
I'm part of your family now.
Right. Great, sir. We are proud, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this privilege of being a member of your family. Thank you.
Mr. Sharma, thank you very much. Very well moderated. Thank you, sir.
Professor Sharma, kindly unmute your mic, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
May I take this opportunity to express my profound gratitude to the Honorable Nobel Laureate Professor Yunus sir, to my Honorable Chancellor Dr. Singh Chauhan ji, and to our highly respected Honorable Founder President sir, and thousands of viewers who have been watching you sir during this webinar. And the thought which you have left behind will reverberate in our mind and soul for days to come, to give us the right inspiration, courage and conviction to walk on the path which you have shown today in this very important, Amity eminent webinar which you have delivered today. Sir, Amity stands for Atmita. Amity stands for eternal bond of belongingness, and that too up to the last breath of life, and even thereafter, who knows, because we may come back again and be together. And it is with this sense of attachment and Atmita with which the entire agenda of Amity University education, research and innovation is being pursued in all our Amity University. And you have given us really a great thought that especially when it comes to healthcare and medicine, a different thinking, business with Atmita, business with Atmita is required. And I pray and hope that the whole world understand what business and business with Atmita as against the business profit means, especially for the medicine and the healthcare sector, which does not differentiate between poor as well as rich. When the disease comes, it does not ask you whether you are a vice chancellor or a simple worker in your university. It strikes to everybody. And therefore, your closing remark on having a global, declaring vaccine as a common global good for the humanity and creating social businesses by which we are able to create business with Atmita in the healthcare and in the medical sector is something which I think is a takeaway for the whole world. And as far as my youngsters are concerned, they have been, I'm sure their battery charged now to recreate a new world where they have a great role to play because they are empowered with the power of science and might of technology. And if they can also assimilate and integrate the power of spirituality, then the business would be with Atmita, and social enterprises will create the kind of divine bliss which, of course, we all desire to create in our own lifetime. With these closing remarks, ladies and gentlemen, may I thank all my viewers from around the world, from within my own country, from all Amity University campuses, from many of my vice chancellor colleagues are connected this time to this webinar, and very many invited of our group, and we have made it also available online on YouTube. And we really wish to thank each one of you for your audience and also for giving your advice onto the chat box, which I had hundreds of questions, and I know I have not done justice with all the questions. I seek forgiveness and in fact, seek your pardon, in fact, all the viewers for this, because I know the time of Nobel laureate is highly precious. But sir, your eminent presence in our Amity eminent webinar today has given us a new lease of life, and we are firmly committed to pursue the agenda which you have given to us during your acceptance of the honorary degree of doctorate at our Amity University, Rajasthan. And as Honorable Founder President sir has said, as well as my Honorable Chancellor, we are here committed with our head, heart and soul to pursue this agenda and to take it forward so that the coming generations would certainly not return to the world from where we are returning back to our roots right now. With these words, may I express my profound gratitude to you and to your daughter who has put together the technology to connect us so well, though we are thousands of miles across. And I pray, as Honorable Founder President also has also said, the whole Amity prays that the cyclone causes no damage whatsoever to the coastal areas and areas of Bangladesh, and also to the coastal areas of Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, and maybe some part of our West Bengal also. I pray to God Almighty to spare us at a time when we are fighting a common enemy, that is coronavirus, COVID-19. Let the whole world come together and pray that the world tomorrow is as better as the Honorable Nobel laureate Professor Yunus sir has designed and desired at this webinar. Thank you so much, sir, once again, from the bottom of our heart. Thank you on behalf of all the viewers who are connected to this global webinar. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.